Another study shows that when the debt to GDP ratio gets to be about 90%, it reduces your potential GDP growth by about 1%. They're not certain why that is. That's what the data says. I think that's because it's reducing the ability of private savers to put their money into productive investments. This is a chart of something that cannot be. You cannot expect U.S. debt to grow by the end of this decade at $2 trillion. Forget what, they're saying it's only going to be $1 trillion. It's going to be closer to 2 if you make realistic assumptions. The U.S. can't borrow $15 trillion in the next 10 years. Somewhere in there, okay, the market goes, nah. Rates start rising. We have a crisis. Unless the U.S. says, okay, we're going to do what other countries in Europe are doing. We're going to start reducing our deficits and do it over time. So this comes back to our original equation. You can't reduce G too fast, because if you do, you're going to throw yourself into a depression, which was precisely what Greece is being told to do. They're being told to reduce their deficits by 4% of GDP a year. Whoa. So that throws them into a negative GDP, throws them into recession. The next year they try to do it again, it throws them into a depression. The reality is that their labor costs 30% more than Germany's does. I mean, what a deal the euro was. The Mediterranean countries got German interest rates, and Germany got a Mediterranean currency. And so, will Germany be upset if the euro goes down a little bit more? Heck no. It'll make them a more powerful exporter. But that doesn't help Greece. Greece doesn't export to the U.S. They export to the rest of Europe. So they get no advantage of a lower euro. You have the same problem with Spain or Greece. Italy's a little bit different. Italy's got a good savings rate. So and as I wrote in this letter, Italy could just get rid of its official cars. They've got 629,000 official cars. That's 50 times more per capita basis than the U.S. has. It's 10 times more than any other European country has. If they just got rid of their cars and their drivers and all that stuff, that's more than 1% of GDP. I mean, they've got some easy targets for savings. So I mean, I'm not as pessimistic about Italy as you could be. Spain's got a problem. They've got 20% unemployment. They owe massive amounts of debt to non-Spanish banks in the forms of private lending, and they've got a housing bubble that's every bit as big as what we had in the U.S. Government spending has a multiplier of essentially nothing. So over time. So what we're doing is we're getting to the place where now we're just going to have to let the economy go where it needs to. And that means I think we're going to have, I'm going to skip this because this is a longer speech and he wants to do it in 35 minutes. You get all those elements of deflation, because we're in a deflationary world in the U.S., especially in the U.S. and most of the world. Greece is going to have a deflationary depression. Britain, interestingly enough, may be able to bring around inflation. Looks like they're having some success at it. That's going to help them with their debt. They want that. But of course, that's going to destroy the pound. Pound's going to parity with the dollar. That means you'll be able to take your Canadian dollar and have some fun in London. It'll be the opposite of what happened, 10, 12 years ago when the Brits came over here and bought everything because it was cheap in Canada. It's going to be cheap there now. Okay, which path for the U.S. economy? We have the Argentinian solution. That's hyperinflation. Not going to happen. The Fed's just not going to print money till there's no tomorrow. They're going to print some in order to give us some inflation, but it won't be hyperinflation. They wouldn't mind seeing 2 or 3% inflation. And we could see inflation by the end of this year get dangerously close to zero. If we go back into a recession next year, we could see inflation go negative because recessions are by definition deflationary. That's not a fun thing for your biggest trading partner to have another recession so close. There's the Austrian school, which says that you just let it all go pear-shaped. Defaults, write the debts down, no regulations. That school of thought has a constituency of precisely one person in Congress. That's my friend Ron Paul. And he might get his son in for the Senate, so there might be one guy in the Senate that buys that. But that's it. So that's not going to happen. There's the Eastern European way, which is you come in and you hit the reset button. You have a structural change. And when the Berlin Wall fell, they got to start over. And they did some good things. I like Soviet tax policy now. 15% flat tax, sign me up. By the way, their tax collections went up dramatically when they dropped the rate. Surprise, surprise. You could get Japanese disease. That's large deficits, no growth. Japan's debt to GDP is about where it was 20 years ago, but the government has risen from 51% to 200%. Individuals have balanced their sheet and have taken it down. But by taking it out of putting it into government, their growth rate, their nominal growth rate is where it was 17 years ago, and they haven't added a job in 20 years. That's not a very good solution, though there are some in the U.S. that advocate that this might be a good policy for us. It's basically the Keynesians, Krugman, and all of those guys that twitch when they talk. Can we edit that out of the tape? I don't want Dr. Krugman to see that. He might not be nice to me. We won't get a Christmas card. So where do I think the U.S. is going to go? Where do I hope they go? I hope we have the glide path option. That's where we choose willingly to reduce the deficit, pull a number out of the air. $150 billion a year? Every year, continuously. I think the markets will let us get away with it because they'll see that we're serious. But if they don't see that we're serious, at some point, that we'll have that break. And I can't tell you when it's going to be, and neither can anybody else, because it'll be when the market has some more confidence. It's like, the kids in my car, when are we going to get there, Daddy? I don't know, but we will.